Monday night. Well, I wasn't in class today with you guys, but I know that you were delightful students, I'm sure, with my sub. And don't worry, I'm not going to be out for admin stuff to be the principal or whatever for a while now. We just needed some help covering while they were out. So, anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to be taking what we learned last unit, and last half of the unit. We just took a test over the first half of Unit 7. Now we're about to take start in the second half, which is 7.6 through 7.11. So we're going to go ahead and we're talking about greatest common factor, or GCF. You might get it here be abbreviated as GBF. No. GCF. GCF. Okay. GCF, greatest common factor. So we're going to find the greatest common factors between the two numbers in each number in each question. We have a 42 and a 60. So what we do here is we just factor out 42. Well, 42 is a 6 and a 7, right? And 60 is 6 times 10. So the greatest common factor that they both have in common, the biggest number they both have in common, is a 6, right? Well, we're going to go ahead and put a 6 down here, and we're going to circle that. That's the greatest common factor that they have in common. Then we have 36 and 64. So you could do 12 times 3, or you could do 6 times 6. We're going to do 6 times 6 because it's broken down a little bit more than 12 is. And then 8 times 8. It doesn't matter really how you do this. If you don't use 12 and 3 instead of 6 and 6, you'll eventually arrive at the same greatest common factor. So they don't have any factors yet in common, so we're going to have to factor these out a little bit more. 6 factors down to 2 times 3, right? So 2 times 3 and 2 times 3. And that's the most we can factor those. You don't factor any more. And then 8 factors into 4 times 2, and 4 times 2, and then so this becomes so 4 times 2 and 4 times 2. And on this one, you have 2 2's that make up a 4. So, you can also have 4 times 9. So here we have, let's see, 2, and 3 is 9. There is 9, yes. So 4 times 9 is what this really is, and 4 is greater than any 2 or 3. So since this one also, since 64 also is a factor of 4, we are going to say that 4 is our greatest common factor. Yes, 2 would also be a common factor of both of them, but they actually have 4 in common. It's a greater common factor, so we're going to go with 4. Okay, let's look at number 3. Now we're going to introduce some letters and exponents, so don't freak out. 6 and 6x squared, 6x squared, and 14x. Okay, so we have a 3 and a 2x can make a 6x squared, right? And over here we have a 7 and a 2x could make a 14x. So the greatest thing they have in common is 2 and an x. You can't forget the x. Sorry, a 3x and a 2x. And so they both have a 2x in common. That's the greatest common factor. Over here we have 32 xyz and 48 xy squared. Let's just go to the number first. We're not going to think about the x, y, and z yet. That's easy to get at the end. But the number, let's factor this out. The greatest factors of 32 would be, 4 and 8 maybe? And over here we have 4 and 12. can we factor any of these down where a 4 is? Yes, 4 right here. 4 and 2. And a 4 times 3. So we have all these 4s that break down. That's going to become our greatest factor. And so now we can see that 16, because look, 16 times 2 would actually go into 32, and 16 times 3 would go into 48. So 16 is going to be your greatest common factor. But you can't forget about the x, the y, and the z's. Is there a z in both of them? No. So z is not going to be part of the greatest common factor. There is an x and there is a y in both of them. So it actually is 16xy is your greatest common factor. I'm going to do a different way of doing this on number 5. I want you to think about all the things that make up 8. Okay, so let's list them over here. 2 and 4, 8 and 1. All right, those are your only factors of the number 8. So my greatest common factor would be, here would definitely be 8. The greatest factor of 8 is 8, okay? But over here with 16, let's see, what things can make 16? 8 and 2, 4 and 4. I think that's about it. So we could have 8 and an 8. Those are our greatest common factors. That's how I prefer to do it than just picking any number. I want to try to figure out all of the factors of that number and then pick the greatest one that they have in common. So 8 is going to be the one they have in common. And then let's look at the letters. There's no n's over here, so we can't count n. But they both do have an m squared in common. There's an m squared here and then at least an m squared here. So 8m squared is going to be our greatest common factor on that one. Okay, so you need to know GCF because as we're going to head into factoring the polynomial. When you factor the polynomial, you're figuring out what they have in common. That's their greatest common factor. And it's actually, the way I like to think about it is it's backwards distribution. So, let's see. What do you think the greatest common factor that they both have in common is? 12 and 15. So, let's see. 12 can be made out of 4 and 3 or 6 and 2. And 15 is made out of, or I guess it could be 12 and 1. 15 is made out of 15 and 1. 5 and 3, right? So what's our greatest common factor here? It's the 3. So we're going to pull out a 3. What the greatest common factor? Your greatest common factor, you pull that out, and that goes on the outside of the parentheses. And then what goes on the inside is what 3 times whatever it would be to equal 12x. So 12x divided by 3 is 4x. 15y divided by 3 is a 5y. Now we could check this by distributing. 3 times 4x is going to give you 12x. 3 times 5y is 15y. Is that what our original was? Yes, it checks out. See here? Okay, let's go on to, let's just do the evens for time. Let's say, so 10, factors of 10. 10 and 1, 2 and 5, okay, and then factors of 30. 30 and 1, 15 and 2, 6 and 5, 10 and 3. So what would be our greatest common factor? 10, right? So we're going to pull 10 out of the parentheses, and it would be A, because 10a divided by 10 is A, and 30b divided by 10 is 3b. So if you wanted, you could check this by doing your distribution. 10 times A is 10A, And 10 times 3b is 30b. And that's what your number has. Okay, let's do 2 more. So we have 8. So 8 is 8 and 1, 4 and 2, 56. We have 56 and 1. What else equals 56? 8 times 7, right? Well, if this is the greatest common factor of 8, this definitely is going to be the thing that they have in common. If the greatest factor of 8, that's going to be definitely what they have in common. So now let's look at the letters. Well, here we have an 8AX and a 56A. Well, they also have an A in common. So we're going to actually pull out not just the 8, but an 8A. And we're going to put X, because 8A times X is 8AX, and a negative 7 here. So now if we were to check it, we would get 8AX minus 56A. You distribute that, okay? So this would be your answer. And then last question. We have a trinomial down here, but the rules are the same. So for 12, you have 12 and 1. You have, I like to list them. I don't like to make the trees, but I like to list them. 12 and 1, what else can make 12? 4 and 3, 6 and 2, right? For 4, it's 4 and 1, 2 and 2, and that's it. For 40, you have 40 and 1, 20 and 2, 8 and 5. Anything else that you can think of that equals 4 and 10? Okay? So what is the greatest common factor that they all have in common? There's a 4 here, a 4 here, and a 4 here. So 4 is definitely going to be your GCF for these 3 terms. But they also have an A in common. So we're going to factor out a 4A. And that's going to leave us with 12A to the third divided by 4A is going to be 3A to the second minus A, or 1A, minus, because it's the minus right here, 10, right? And if we were to check that, it would be 4A times 3A is 12A to the third. 4A times negative A is negative 4A squared. And 4A times a negative 10 is a negative 40A. And that's exactly what you have there. So let's go ahead and save the odd numbers, and we'll work on those in class. Have a good evening, and I'll see you tomorrow on my birthday. That's your keyword. Birthday is your keyword. Yes, I am turning the big 3-5. Have a good night.
Tomorrow is your birthday? Tomorrow is your birthday?